Hello everybody, and welcome to 10-Minute Nodes, a guide to the visual scripting tool for space engineers. Today, we'll be taking a look at some more of the commonly used nodes in the visual scripting tool. Alright, so let's take a look at some nodes. I've created a temporary level script here. You guys can create one as well. It doesn't matter what you name it because we won't be saving it today. So I'm going to flip over really quick to Keen's Guide on Steam because they do a pretty good job of explaining what a node is. And then what I'll do is I'll read each node and then I'll go back over into the visual scripting tool, show you how to get the node, and show you the different parts of the node. So the first one we're going to look at is in the value control node section. So we're going to start out with a variable node. For anybody who programs, these should be self-explanatory, but for those who don't, this represents a script global variable of some primitive type. So it can be an integer, a boolean, a string, a vector 3D, or a long integer, or a list of any of those types. The value can be read or written by other nodes. It can be connected to nodes that need the value directly. The value can be changed over time during the course of the script being run, and it has an initial value declared. So if we go back over to the visual scripting tool very quickly, and we put down a new variable, you can see here, if you double click on where it says variable name, you can edit it, so we can call it variable1. And then if you double click on where it says integer, you get this nice little drop down box where you can decide what sort of variable you want it to be. And then underneath that, where in this case the 0 is, we can define its starting value. Now I just want to point out a certain thing. If you switch this over to, let's say, a string, you'll notice that third box disappears. If you ever have a string variable and you want to have a set definition for it at the beginning, you're going to have to use another node called a setter, which we will cover in a moment, to set it at the beginning of the script. So let's delete that really fast. And back over to here. Second one we're looking at is the arithmetic node. So this represents a basic arithmetic and boolean operation. And it takes two values as parameters, changes its type to first assigned type. I'll explain that in a bit. And the plus operation can be used to join strings. So if we go back over here really fast, and if you right click, this is how you get this nodes menu. And just click arithmetic. And you can see here we have two inputs on the left and a single output on the right. And if we double click where the plus is, you see we can get this nice little drop down box and we can change it to, let's say, comparing. Now what it means by that, it is, as it says here, it changes its type to the first assigned type. So in order to determine what the output is, if it's going to be a string, an integer, or a float, or something like that, is it looks at the first node that is connected to one of its inputs. So if I were to take, let's say, a variable that was an integer and plug it into input A or B, it doesn't matter, that would define this arithmetic node as outputting an integer. The one exception in this case is if you put two integers in and you're using division and the end result turns out to not be a whole number, the output will automatically change to a float. That's just something to keep in mind. And what they mean when they say that the plus can be used with strings is that you can have two different strings that you can then kind of merge together. You'll use this a lot when creating custom messages to display. Since the localization is broken, you're going to have to use constants and integers converted to strings on the inputs. Also, another thing to keep in mind, the way the arithmetic node handles it, it is input A, whatever action it's defined, and then input B. So in this case, it would be input A plus input B. Or in the case of subtraction, it's input A minus input B. And let's get rid of that real quick. Alright, so moving down here, we come to the set node, or a setter as you can tell here. And this has a sequence input and output, which means it's a sequence dependent node. And the value of the chosen variable can be set directly to some value, or the value can be supplied by another value node. So if we hop in here really quick, and we need to make a variable really quick, I'll put it as an integer. And if we put a setter, you see here, we can double click here. This will give us a drop down list of all the variables that we have in our current level script. This is very useful. It's better than having to manually type it in. And then under here, if we double click on here, we can edit the value, and this is what allows us to change that value. Now, also as it said, you can have maybe an arithmetic node provide an output and put that output into here, and then the setter will set it to whatever that is. But really quickly, as I was talking about before, with if we have a string variable, just change this variable over here to a string, change the name so we know what it is. And if I put down a new setter node and change that setter node to string, you'll see that value box has disappeared and all we get is the value input. And so in this case, we'd have to use a constant, or we'd have to use a string output of an arithmetic node or something else to put into that value. But then that's how you would set the value for the string. And if you need the string variable to have a set value at the beginning of your level, you would need to attach one of these plus the value to the game started method node. But that's it for that. Along with this, which is related, is the get node. So it's a shortcut to make our graphs more readable. Take specified variable name as a parameter for another node that needs its value without having to connect it to a variable node directly. So what that's saying is if we get a getter here, which is right under setter, you can see here that it popped up with a variable name, and this one's blue. Now literally all this is just a value fetch node. So it'll get whatever the value that variable name is. In this case it's 0, and it'll give that to whatever value input. In this case we can attach it here. And as you can see, when we attach it, that box with the value goes away, and there's a black line connecting the two. Moving down, we get to the constant node, which has no type or value unless it gets connected to the value input of a different node. And it supports primitive types, colors, enums, and vector 3D. And pretty much it's a constant, so it'll always remain the same. So it's underneath the setter and getter in the list. And if you double click on it, we can say hello world. And if we create another one, we can type in 12. And literally it's a constant. So in this case, this one would end up turning into a string if we connected it to something, and this one would turn into most likely an integer. Next underneath that is logic gate nodes. These support Boolean operations, so and, NAND, or, nor, XOR, and NOT. All operations except NOT can have as many inputs as needed for your script, and the inputs and outputs are all a type of Boolean. And that's really all of the value control nodes. I might do a video later explaining logic gate nodes. And that concludes this tutorial video. Next time we'll be taking a look at some more nodes that you'll use in the visual scripting tool. But that is it for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.